Or does it belong to the school?
Ready? I'm ready. Actually, I'm feeling pretty good.
I'm getting my second wind now.
Well, that one, are you talking about the one who said there's mold in the schools because we shut the air conditioners? I there's no mold in any of the
I'm
schools.
taking the big one.
I think the same thing this summer we were here.
Good afternoon.
Let me know if you want to.
I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the school board special meeting this Tuesday, July 2nd, 2020. Please stand for a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for being here this afternoon to discuss this very serious COVID-19. Due to the discussion of school reopening taking place during this board meeting, the hearing of citizens section is being moved to the end of the meeting. This will give you an opportunity to hear what's being planned before you come up to speak, which I think makes a lot of sense. Your questions might be answered beforehand. Board members received the emails that you sent, the email comments that you sent prior to the meeting. Mrs. Corcoran?
Good afternoon. If it's okay and you will indulge me, I have a little surprise. We had what I believe to be an amazing superintendent search process this time. And so we have a video we would like to share that kind of summarizes the process and all of the wonderful things that have happened. So, Brandon, if you could play that for us, I'd appreciate it.
Let's start going around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. If you're opposed, if you're keeping notes for one of our candidates, you can identify your candidate.
Today starts the culmination of a 6-month process in which we are conducting and finalizing the search for Sarasota County's next superintendent.
Bill Vogel with the Florida School Boards Association, and I'm really looking forward to today.
The search has been an extensive nationwide search. The Citizens Committee did an outstanding job reviewing all the candidates. The board determined they were impressed with the 5 that the Citizens Committee brought forward, and those individuals were named finalists, and they're here today. The day begins with interviews that the board is having with each of the 5 finalists, and while the candidates are being interviewed, the other candidates will be taking a tour of Sarasota County. And the tours are on school buses that are personalized with the candidates' names, and on the tour bus will be staff members and team members from Sarasota County Schools.
Today really has been flawless. They each have spoken to really the professionalism of the staff that's been touring and guiding them today and getting them from place to place. Tonight is kind of the opportunity for a virtual Q&A from the public.
Typically, we would have a large facility, and there would be several hundred community members who would come out and meet all the candidates personally and interact with them. But because of social distancing, we have shifted to a live virtual platform.
On July 14th, the school board will make a decision on who Sarasota's next superintendent is.
Your school board is committed to finding someone who will lead this district with both an eye towards protecting and respecting the past history of the school district and an eye towards the future to ensure that all students in Sarasota County schools are going to learn to their greatest capacity.
So with that, I have some thank yous that I'd like to express. I mean, to me, my staff and the staff, all of the staff, the team has been phenomenal. So each candidate had a host. So Jody, Laura, Chris, and Sonia filled in for Chris today. Steve Cantis and Chief Tim Enos all served as hosts. I want to thank Jason, who I think is hopefully on Zoom, and his entire transportation team for routing out the tours for our candidates. I would like to thank the Education Foundation and the SCTA for providing meals, FSBA for their leadership and guidance, and mostly I want to thank Kathy Tompkins and Linda Termine, my administrative assistant, who have gone above and beyond in making this entire process, I think, pretty flawless. So then next up is I would like to make, we've had a lot of comments, particularly on social media, with regard to graduation. So I'd like to just make a comment, and then we'll move on from there. But so as of today, there have been more than 7,200 children who have tested positive for coronavirus. This virus has shifted to younger individuals, including more than 155 hospitalizations. This in a disease that many believed children were resilient against and couldn't contract. This shift, the continuous record number of positive cases on a nearly daily basis in Sarasota County, and the guidance from our health department and the governor's executive order 2139 for gatherings no larger than 50, we have canceled our in-person graduation ceremonies. This was not an easy decision for anyone. It has actually been agonizing for us and every one of our principals, since graduation is a rite of passage, not only for our high school seniors, but our 5th and 8th graders as they transition to their new schools. Apologize. While we are no longer planning any large celebrations, we have tried to find ways to celebrate our high school graduates by giving every graduate a yard sign to celebrate their achievements. We have created virtual or digital graduation ceremonies that these students will be able to watch through the years and will be getting on what was their scheduled graduation day in July. And every high school principal is working on a ceremony to bring in their graduate and their families into the school in their caps and gowns. They will walk across the stage, take pictures with the school staff and their family, and have an individualized celebration. As a district, we need to follow the guidelines that can best keep our children safe. I would not be able to, in good conscience, say that we are not going to follow the guidance of our health department partners. If a student were to become ill and they were not able to start college on time, report for military service, or start their new job, we would feel incredibly guilty, and we can't place a single celebration, even one this important, over the safety of our students. I've asked Michael Drennan from the health department to further discuss the health reasons on why we canceled. I'm not sure if we should be able to see those. He's got his sound off, so he's not muted. We have him set on mute.
Can you say so we can hear you?
There he is.
Can everybody hear me okay?
No, we couldn't hear you, Michael. If you could.
Oh, now we can.
Now we
You
can.
can't hear me at all?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, no, I think that was an excellent summary. You know, the justification here from the governor's office and the Surgeon General is based on the increase of cases that we've seen both in the state, and that is reflected in the numbers we've seen here in the county. A trend not only increase in total cases, but also amongst individuals younger than what we've seen in the past. Building on this, the importance of social distancing, wearing a mask, and keeping gatherings less than 50. The intent of those are to prevent the spread of the disease, and that's, that's the guidance that we have from not only our Surgeon General but our governor, and that's the recommendation that we made to the planning committee as it related to the questions regarding graduations and other events. I know this is a significant event, and these recommendations aren't made lightly, but we have to keep in mind the intent of them is to prevent the spread, and we want to keep everyone safe, and that's kind of the justification we have there. I'm happy to answer any questions and build on that, if there are any.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Oh, yeah, no, he's staying with us. Actually, he's going to go into the next topic, actually, that I was going to talk about, which was, since we're actually on the topic of public health and safety, I'd actually like to ask Michael and Susie DeBose, our health supervisor, to help provide some answers. We've received a lot of questions on what does it mean if someone is notified or has notified us that they've either tested positive or that they've come in contact with somebody. So what are our protocols and procedures? So I'd like to ask them kind of walk through that for everybody so that everybody can know what we're going to be doing. Oh, and there she is.
Oh, actually, can Michael hear me?
Michael's right here. He's there. You can't have them up otherwise? Gallery view is fine. Is it, I'm sorry, if you could do gallery view and then allow them as they're speaking to kind of come forward and everybody goes back, can you do that? Okay. Thanks. Okay, sorry.
Hello, everyone. Michael, if you would like to just walk through the direction we received as a district from DOH when a case is reported to us or suspected case, just kind of the process that we've agreed upon. Can you hear me? There's one that
Here, come here, Susie. Use mine.
Thank you.
Technology. You gotta.
We're all getting used to it. Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Susie.
Great. Would you please share with the team, that with our partners, everyone, the process that we agreed upon with DOH when a case is reported to us or a suspected case, kind of what we put in place as a district, working in partnership with DOH?
Well, sure. I was going to let you lead off, and then I can fill in behind that and expand on anything.
Okay, so, and we've received a few calls over the last few days. What's important to remember is there's a difference between a positive diagnosis and my cousin of a friend of somebody who's positive. CDC, and this is my understanding as of today, doesn't really define the low, moderate, high risk anymore. They give you some parameters to discuss that will guide in your decisions, like who should be excluded, who should wear a mask and stay socially distanced and whatnot. So the calls I'm receiving are reports of positive diagnosis. If you receive a positive diagnosis, there is a paper trail. The lab that tested you does provide hard copy information. We have not asked for that to this point. Our employees are pretty responsible. You know, if they say they're positive and we say stay in touch with your provider, follow the DOH guidance, that's kind of where we've been. But there's some delay with lab reports, I'm hearing, and maybe some confusion with UTC National Guard testing versus Robert L. Taylor, DOH kind of sanction testing. So at the end of the day, if you call and say, I have a positive diagnosis, you are obviously excluded. If there are members of your family, of your household that work in the district or children that are in our schools, they'll be asked to exclude as well. We caveat every decision for exclusion with until you hear or unless you hear something different from your provider or DOH. So we've made a few decisions based on a positive diagnosis and some, and you want to jump in, Jody? I see you.
Well, I was just going to say, let's back up 1 second. So let's talk about the process for reporting. So one of the things that we've done, and Susie has been integral in this process, is put together a reporting tool. So as we come back into the start of school, whatever that looks like, we know we've got to have a way to get this all into a database so we can track what's going on where. So we've developed an online reporting tool that'll go to all of our sites. Administrators will have it, probably clinic aides, nurses will have it, so that at any point, if anybody comes in and says, I've had exposure to COVID-19, or if we get any kind of a notion that there's a COVID-19 exposure at a school site with employee or student, that'll be logged by a number of individuals. We'll have the opportunity to log that into our system. We at the landings, we have a team identified to respond to every one of those. Susie is leading that team in partnership with Michael's team at the health department. So that tool is designed to send us a quick email that says there's been a new report. We log into the system. We see what that report looks like, who's involved, where the report is of the case, at what particular site it's at, and then the investigation starts. And so we will have, if we have to, have multiple teams assigned to that investigation process, and that includes working with the health department to make sure we are contact tracing who is that person had contact with on our campuses, when's the last time they were there, is it truly a positive COVID-19 test result, or is it just something they're waiting on, or is it something they've been in contact with somebody who else was positive? So there's a lot of questions that team has to work through with the person who's made the report. So that team is working through those issues based on what they find out with those interviews in conjunction with the health department, and they're making the recommendations. We will then start to exclude people from work or exclude students from classrooms, whatever that needs to be. But again, that is in partnership with the health department. So we will have this tool out there. We'll have the reports coming in. We will have teams assigned to make those assessments as quick as possible, get that information back to the school site, and make sure we are communicating with everybody who's affected in that particular case. One of the questions that has come up is our communication strategy. And again, one of the things we're dealing here with is health-related issues, so we got to be careful about what and how we communicate. So our strategy, again, in working with partnership with the health department, is to communicate exactly and effectively with the people who are affected in that particular case. And so, for example, there may be a case, there hasn't been, but there may be a case here at the landings. If there was, we'd get the report of that. The team would contact trace, work with the health department, understand what those critical interactions between everybody involved were. Based on those, they'd make recommendations to the individuals on exclusion or a mask or whatever needed to happen to make sure everybody was safe, and the communication would go out to everybody involved. However, we would not be communicating with people who were nowhere close to the case, who had no contact with the case, because again, these are sensitive health issues. So our communication is really targeted and focused directly at the people who are involved in the individual cases. So with that, Michael, if you want to fill in some details, or Susie, you want to add to that, but that is kind of our process at this point. As we lay out, we go on break next week. As soon as we come back from break, we'll be communicating that process with all our administrators. And so as we move to the start of school, we are kind of one team focused on these cases. And again, critical in terms of getting the information quickly, assessing with the health department quickly, and then communicating back to the site and back to the individuals affected what we're doing, how we're doing it, and making sure we're safe for everybody on our campuses. So that's kind of overview of the process, and if you guys want to add some details, that'd be great.
Michael?
Sure. No, had several conversations with Susie and Jody and the team about what best strategy to use to kind of tackle this. Obviously, the school system is a very large system, both as students and employees, so how best to manage the potential number of exposures and communicate that information quickly is really important. So I'm really happy and glad to see this tool spreadsheet that they've developed to help report to us not only the cases that have been reported to them. It happens that sometimes individuals will get their lab results before we do, so sometimes it's quicker when an employer reports them or a partner reports them to us. It helps us start the investigation quickly, but to not only track those cases, but also people who've been potentially exposed. And so the quicker that's done, the quicker that we can exclude or recommend the exclusion of staff evaluating the situation or children evaluating the exposure. And I think this tool is really going to help do that. I'm really happy to see that. It's not something that everybody does, and I wish it would be helpful if other agencies did it as well. So I think that's a great piece, and always ease of communication is one thing that I really like. It's easy to talk to Jody and Susie, easy to get a hold of them as we work through these processes and plans. That's just going to build on when we do eventually have exposures in the school, because this is something that will happen. We know this disease isn't going to go away overnight, so we're going to be dealing with it for the next little bit. And so the better processes we have in place now, it's going to make it easier to respond when we do have an exposure and respond appropriately. So as far as specifics goes, the information that we've relayed and requested, I know that's in the spreadsheet, so that just makes it easier on our side doing those case investigations and contact follow-up. Like I said, happy to see that tool. I think it's going to be really helpful.
Any questions?
Do you guys have questions on that?
Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. Well, first, I want to thank the chair, the board, Mrs. Corcoran, the whole team for coming together, and Michael Drennan also, and Department of Health in the county. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I know it's been a very long couple of days. I know it's been a very long couple of months. So I wanted to make sure I said that. I know, and I think you addressed most of them, particularly and Jody, thank you for that, this is sensitive information we have to follow HIPAA, and naturally I can understand people in the community if your child is at a school and you hear about it, and that concern is just going to happen. However, I think outlining how detailed and the contact tracing is, but also looking at where those members of staff have gone. And so I want to ensure confidence into our families that their privacy will be protected, but they'll be notified according to necessity. Now, the one question I do have, and Susie, you touched upon this, is the difference between county and state. And so there is sometimes a lag time of getting back tests. Mm-hmm. And from a directional standpoint, if there is someone that has been exposed to someone positive, we are then directing them to, once we identify who that is, we're directing them to quarantine and get a test? Or can you talk me through if that's a process at all? And this could be staff or students. I just wanted to get some direction on that.
So, and Michael, feel free to jump in, and Jody, if a staff member has, first of all, the very first thing we say is if you're not feeling well, stay home.
Right.
Don't come to school. Don't come to campus, just stay home. So then we've changed our ruling based on DOH guidance that it's not 24 hours fever-free anymore. It's 72. So if you're not well, stay home. You're home for a couple days anyway. If you decide to get a test, we cannot mandate anyone get a test. If you decide to get a test, you should get your results, if you do not go to UTC, within 24 to 48 hours, and then we'll have information that we can work with. If we do not have a positive diagnosis as suspected, to this point as a team, we have been doing our own contact tracing, saying, where were you? Again, there's no mild, moderate risk defined, so we look at things like, were you within 6 feet for an extended period of time without a mask? What were you doing? If you're just passing each other in the media center, you're probably okay. But if you were working together, weekends and whatnot, putting together curriculum, then we'll probably say, please, we're going to exclude you until you hear from DOH or your provider with additional guidance. Did that answer your question?
It did. No, and I wanted to thank you. That did. Thank you very much.
Michael, it looks like
Mr.
you want to jump in.
I was going to expand on it just a little bit. I think there's kind of 3 different scenarios that we could be potentially faced with. So number one is someone who's sick, not feeling well, and as Suzu said, the recommendation there is to exclude them until they are symptom-free, specifically fever-free for 72 hours. They get tested. That provides us some additional information. The next piece is going to be a person who's a confirmed positive. So someone gets tested positive, and it could be a student or a staff member. The recommendation there is to exclude that individual for at least 10 days. Based on the science right now, it looks like the duration of illness at which a person is able to transmit this to another individual is approximately 10 days. So within that 10 days, we want to see an improvement of symptoms and at least 3 days of 72 hours of no fever without any medication. Now, if that doesn't happen within the 10 days, the 10 days is extended, but it's going to be at least 10 days. So this can trip some people up, so that's why I want to try to clarify it. So that's a confirmed case is the 10 days. If someone's been exposed to a confirmed case, the recommendation is 14 days of exclusion. And the reason for that is because the incubation for the period for the disease, the period from when you've been exposed till when you could potentially develop symptoms, based on the science right now, appears to be at most 14 days. It can be as short as 2. Most people happen 6 to 7, but 14 days is going to be that longest window. That's regardless of a negative test within that 14-day period. Many people think, oh, I'm going to be excluded for 14 days, I'll go get tested, I'll be negative, and then I can come back. Regardless of a negative test within that period, they need to do at least the 14 days. That doesn't mean we discourage testing, especially toward the end of the period, because it might help pick up an asymptomatic person. But those are kind of the 3 kind of windows that or 3 kind of buckets you're looking at. And I think that'll help. Hopefully that helps understand, the picture that I'm trying to paint there. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
It sounds like you guys have a great procedures and about a student having issues. But what if we add an S at the end? What if it's 20%, 30%, 50% of a class, 10%, 20%, 30%, 50% of a school? What do we do? I mean, it is a contagious illness. So I understand the process when a student isn't feeling well. What's the process when a classroom isn't feeling well? And what's the process when a school isn't feeling well?
Michael, do you want to share the discussion around if it's Mrs. Smith's classroom and somebody tests positive in Mrs. Smith's classroom, what our plan is going, because we talked about possibly rolling closures of spaces and 24, 48 hours cleaning those spaces and being back online. But Michael, are you comfortable just kind of sharing if the kids were wearing a mask or behind their shield?
The guidance that we're providing, and that's an excellent question. It's a very complicated question. I always hate to say, it's kind of a case-by-case situation, but sometimes that's what it is. So it's going to depend on the setting. Our schools are elementary, middle, and high schools are all set up a little bit different. So if it's Ms. Smith's class in an elementary school and the students have been fairly contained within that one cohort, it's easy to exclude just that class, whether or not that's one student or multiple. Easier to contain that to smaller pockets. That becomes a little bit more difficult. Where contact tracing comes in place there is that we want to identify all the contacts the student may have had or the staff may have had, or students, to your point, or staff members, multiple there, may have had within that building. And depending on the difficulty of that nature, we may have to recommend allow for better contact tracing to identify those students who can come back and to allow for disinfection of the school, looking at least a 24-hour period to get in there and wipe out all the high-touch surfaces. Like I said, I hate to say a case-by-case situation, but that's sometimes what we run into when we have outbreaks or clusters of illness.
So what would be the educational delivery process during those exclusion times? Dr. Kingsley?
So we are working right now on having our teachers work together with our specialists so that our teachers are all prepared to do delivery of instruction remotely in the case of a spontaneous shutdown. They are building exemplars through July and doing training with teachers on our Blackboard, which is a place where we heard a lot during ICANN plan that parents struggled with where to find the instruction for their children, where to find every assignment. They had to go to too many platforms. So the expectation is going to be that our teachers are able to post all of their lesson plans, all their assignments, all of their announcements in this one platform, and then the content will be delivered.
And that's you were saying if there was a shutdown, but that would also happen if one kid was excluded. So a teacher's going to be doing this continuously, even if they're not shut down, but they have one kid excluded. They would still be posting everything on their Blackboard. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they will have their lesson plans up on Blackboard.
Sure.
It's a really challenging scenario.
I agree.
Yep.
But you up for the task, Laura?
I don't know about that. We're going to work together, but it's going to be very hard on our parents. So we're sensitive to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Brown?
My question is to Dr. Drennan. I understand that there were some daycares or childcare centers, maybe even having older kids in them, that were closed, that were open in New York to watch the emergency workers' children, and they didn't have issues. Did we have any even in Sarasota that were open for the emergency services people that were working? I mean, and what happened at those? Did we have any incidences at those, or do you know about that?
First, one correction. As much as I would love to be a doctor and I would be happy to take that title, I am neither a physician nor do I have a PhD. So Michael's fine.
Okay, Michael.
So yeah, to answer your question, there were several daycares. They were open at many had limited capacity based on providing services to childcare services to essentially essential workers. To the best of my knowledge, we didn't have any cases in any of these facilities, at least to date. I say to my knowledge because one of the things that's frustrating about COVID is there's many that are asymptomatic or have mild illness that we may have not been tested, we may have not been reported, but we definitely didn't have any clusters or outbreaks in any of those facilities.
Yeah, and I heard the same was true in New York, which I don't know if that helps us or not, but thank you.
It's very, one thing I'd like to point on too, and it was hit on earlier, is while at the beginning we definitely saw the bulk of and the majority of this disease in individuals over the age of 65 around the country and really over the age of 70 in Sarasota, this disease can impact anyone regardless of age. It seems to have a more negative impact on individuals 65 plus and those with compromised immune systems, but it can affect children as well. As we see more cases in younger individuals, the chances for exposure obviously exist there. So being prepared and having a plan, it's definitely critical.
Can you tell us how many are hospitalized now, and how those numbers have varied?
I do not know off the top of my head how many have been hospitalized.
Yeah.
I do know at the beginning those numbers, if we go back to March and April, those numbers were elevated and then decreased a little bit based on some of the social distancing and essentially the closing of normal activities. As those activities open back up and we've seen more cases, hospitalizations have increased. I know that they're well within the capacity of the hospital to handle right now, but I know they're increasing as we see more cases in the community.
Thank you. I haven't been able to read a paper.
Michael, this is Chuck. I can comment on the number of cases, although I don't have a separation between adult and child cases, just the total cases in Sarasota. To give perspective, a week ago we had 37 COVID positive individuals in our hospitals, amongst the 4 hospitals, and today we have 69. So we have seen a daily increase, still far below capacity level, but we are seeing an increase, and we're watching that closely.
69.
So I just wanted to say welcome to Mr. Charles Henry. He's the director of the Sarasota County Health Department. So Chuck, thank you for getting on with us today and joining Michael online. Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your expertise from both of you. Thank you, guys.
I'm trying to remain silent because Michael's been our conduit to your planning teams and is certainly capable, but it's an important meeting, so I just wanted to sit in and listen.
Which we appreciate. Thank you very much. And actually, I'd like to just let the board know, if I could, joining us today are members of the reopening task force. So back in the back, if you guys all want to raise your hands, they've kind of all come in here to help us. And then joining us by Zoom, everyone had the opportunity. I'm not sure how many people are on, if it's 20, yeah, because right now it doesn't look like that many. But there are 30 people. Yeah, it would be nice if they could. So anyways, we have 30 people via Zoom, and so I've asked them that if they'd like to speak, if they could just type into the chat. So we'll just have to kind of monitor the chat so that they can, also contribute in the conversation. This was the development of these plans was a monumental task. They're still very much draft guidelines. So a lot of times there was a lot of comments about why do you have words like consider or, should or discuss or investigate. And again, because things are so fluid for us and we're developing so many things. In the plans, while they are very much part of a parental decision on what to do for your kids, it's also a guiding document for the school-based, the school site administrators that they will use to develop their own school-specific plan. Tuttle Elementary School and a Riverview High School and how they reopen are going to look very different. And so that's why there's a lot of not quite so definitive language in these plans. So we're hoping, by the end of this meeting and then on the 14th that we'll be able to solidify it a bit more. I did want to go through, we did send out a parental preference survey. So you guys all have this document, I would imagine. There's just a few slides in here that we were going to kind of go through. Our parents were asked four questions. We received actually 18,374 traditional school responses, which in the short amount of time that we had it open, I thought was quite good. Pretty high percentage. We're going to show it up there or no? Oh, yeah, sorry. So I've asked Dr. Cantalupo, Dr. Denise, this is referred to her, to go through it. She's our survey expert, and so. Oh, there we go. So get to page 2.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Missy said, we sent out the survey last Friday. It's still open today. We pulled the data yesterday afternoon so we could prepare for this presentation. It's still ongoing, so the responses have climbed again today. And we'll leave it open because we want to make sure that we get as much input as possible. And these are unduplicated responses, so we cleaned up the data quite a bit before we put it out here. So parents were given the option of completing the survey. It appeared on our district website. It was also at every school. So they had easy access, and it's still out there. Before they completed it, we asked them to please look at the reopening plans so that they could guide their decision better. So they were redirected right to the plan so they could look those over. These results represent only traditional schools. Charter schools were not in these counts. It represents all grade levels, and every grade level in school was really represented well. Very short survey, only 4 questions. So the first one we asked is if or when you're returning to school in the fall, which of these options would you prefer? And the highest, 74%, said they would like their child to return in person. 21%, if available, to be enrolled in some sort of a full-time remotely at his or her school, and that was explained in the plan. And then the virtual program was also asked. We didn't specify which virtual program, but we left it here, and we would deal with that later, and that came in at 5%. I will say, from the first time I looked at the results last Saturday to today, they're pretty consistent. The numbers keep growing. Second question, are we there? Okay, is if your child was returning to school, we found when we did our first series of questionnaires that wearing a face covering became a topic of concern, and it's all over. Do you wear it or you do not wear it? And you can see here, 62% said yes, they would like some sort of a face covering, 38% said no. We also asked about transportation, another big concern of ours upon reopening. Were you planning to have your child ride the bus? 65% no, 35% said yes. And then our final question was, even if you were planning to ride the bus, would you be willing to drive and pick up your child this first semester or these first couple of weeks while we're having this issue? And 86% said yes. So, which leads us into another direction about how many cars will be in the parking lot when they're dropping off their kids in the morning. So, very brief survey, all yes and no. We didn't ask for a lot of, because we wanted to do quick counts and get it out and to help our plans. Questions?
Denise, could you tell us, do you know the schools that are represented in this survey?
Yes, I do, and all traditional schools are represented. I checked to make sure we had input.
When the parents came in, when the survey came in, you know where the surveys were coming from, the parents? My question is Booker in this, is M.E.
Yes.
Booker in this survey?
Yes.
And Tuttle Elementary?
Yes.
With the driving, that's
We
what-
also
the next school year would be very different from what we did during ICANN. ICANN was 3 hours of instruction and, trying to get through it, and it was a lot on the parents. This is where we would literally have your child in a remote learning schedule. So their teacher would be teaching them from their school in the classroom by themselves, and they would have 25 little faces or 18 little faces or however many little faces it is on a screen, and they would be teaching them remotely. But it would be way more robust. I think that's the big key word to be using in their learning systems than it would be previously. Laura, do you want to talk some more about that?
Well, two things that I just want to say, and Denise sat down. Another reason for the N number, I want to make clear, Caroline, too, the survey results were chunked by school and given to those principals so they could start thinking about it. The only way they could do that is by having the N number. But it's not a commitment on the parents' part. We will have to have a commitment at some point where we say, and likely, or when we get back in July, we need to have a commitment where they say, yes, I want my child to do remote, or I want my child traditional, because we will have to staff, and it's kind of a staffing nightmare when you think about it. We have to staff based on demand. So we're going to have to put all those pieces together like a 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle at every school.
Yeah.
And, like you said, Mitzi, what's happening now is we are having teams of teachers sit down and think about coursework, starting with classes, that they could introduce new concepts to children. In fourth quarter, they were doing a lot of review of the curriculum that was already learned, and they relied a lot on a contracted curriculum that we had called Apex. And we, in K-5, we're going to rely on our teachers to deliver that content that they know their children best. They're going to look at the child's assessment data and make decisions on how can I take this child, no matter who they are and where they are, how can I accelerate this child from either below level or above level? How can I continue to accelerate them even though I'm doing it remotely? And we know that a child has to be independent still. I know, in my own family, trust me, I have 9 grandchildren, and watching parents try to navigate through keeping the kids focused on their learning when they were, not really interested in staying focused on their learning is a challenge for our parents. And, we're very concerned about our parents and the economic impact that it might be to have your children remotely trying to learn. So we have plans for remote spontaneous shutdowns. Even if a parent said, I want to go back to school, we have spontaneous shutdowns that Chuck and Michael referred to, but we also have planning for those teachers who are doing curriculum fully remote for at least a semester.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, so you stopped right at where I wanted to ask the question about the dichotomy between the two. So we have parents who want to come in and out, not because the kids are sick, but because they have fear, and they're like, well, I don't want to I'll send my kids back when I feel comfortable. And so they are looking to have, what are the options for them? That they, did you have to be there for the semester? And I'm asking a question, I'm not making a statement. I just want to make sure that these people understand that if you say, I don't feel safe, I want to have my kids home, is that a semester decision? Mm-hmm. Or is that a weekly or monthly decision? And if they decide that, what does that mean? And I have some follow-up questions, as you can imagine.
When you think about saying to a teacher, you're going to have a class of children, let's just say third graders, you're going to teach them remotely. And then the parents say, but I don't want remote after week 3, and you have groups of kids leave and go back to a classroom where the classroom was already staffed based on a class of 18 or 20
Well, I get the issue. I was just trying to find out I want to make sure these parents understand what they're getting themselves, what would occur.
Correct. And
Right.
I mean, children can always return to their home school. I mean, we can't deny them that. That's fine. But we're just trying to staff without overstaffing. I mean, we're trying to be mindful of one, it's hard. We're hoping we can just get all the teachers that we need hired, let alone trying to hire additional teachers. We can't, we don't get funded for more than one teacher for a student. So that becomes part of the issue. I think at high school, I mean, Steve's here, he can probably fill you in on those who go in and out could be very difficult because it could be a chemistry teacher who teaches 4 periods a day in person and 2 periods a day remotely. So again, trying to make sure that we're meeting class size and also able to, make sure our teachers are only having so many kids in a class. And so, I mean, trust me, I would hope that if somebody chose to do remote learning, that the commitment would be at least for a quarter.
So the preferred method would be that if you decide on your own to do this, that did you say semester?
Well, I mean, ultimately, we would hope, if that's what they wanted to do, that was the kind of the commitment they wanted to make for a year. But again, if they choose 6 months from now or 3 months from now or at the end of a quarter or end of the half of the year, a semester, we don't have the ability to deny them the.
I was asking the preference to let people.
Well, I would think semester would be the easiest because of the.
Right. So I think I heard you say the preferred time frame would be a semester.
That's true.
If people wanted to, ebb and flow and come out. And so what happens to, you said homeschool, the home, be able to come back to the homeschool. We've had some people who have school choiced.
Yeah.
And so now they have school choice to pick a name of the school, school A. Whatever the school, Tuttle. Let's just say Tuttle. They school choice to Tuttle, but they don't want to go to Tuttle for right now until they're phone safe. So they're going to take the semester off and do distance learning. January comes, but the homeschool is say Fruitville. When January comes and they go back to school, are they going back to Tuttle or are they going back to Fruitville?
Tuttle.
So you're talking 2 different scenarios. If they choose full-time virtual program through Sarasota Virtual, they connect and they want to do totally independent curriculum with virtual, then they have lost their seat if they're a choice school. But if they sign up for the remote, we're going to try very hard to use the teachers at that school. And if they come back, they are still at that school. It is their school of registry.
I think people are saying, I want you to put a camera and I want to stay with, Miss Johnson. I just didn't know if that was okay with you. They say, I want to stay with Miss Johnson. They're in Miss Johnson's class. And so they'll be able to, you're saying that they'll be able to stay with Miss Johnson, or you're saying they'll be able to stay at a teacher at Tuttle?
When they sign up, you don't know what teacher you're going to get. So you can't, will be signing up to go remote for hopefully a semester with a teacher that also has decided to teach remote. And then when you return, then we'll have time to reshuffle the jigsaw puzzle and get a teacher in traditional brick and mortar so that they can go back to a classroom that's not overcrowded.
And I assume there'll be some sort of matching program where you have teachers who don't feel safe and you're going to assign them to be teaching remotely. I would assume
that would be the beautiful solution.
Yes,
that would be the best solution if that is the case.
We like beautiful solutions.
I know. We like people happy.
Individual school, so we would have to go by individual school.
Okay, but but if somebody, you know how people are. If somebody says I'm in Miss Johnson's class, and then in September they say, it's spiking, so I want to pull out, but I still want them to be taught remotely with a camera in Miss Johnson's class.
That won't be their.
That's not going to be an option. No. I'm just making sure that when people.
I don't think it's possible.
All right, Mitzi, I'm asking the questions for the benefit of the people listening.
No, I agree. But my answer is I don't believe it would be possible because the remote teacher is only teaching remotely. At least at the elementary grade levels. They would be a second grade teacher of remote students. Whereas the in-person teacher, if they had somebody who was in person and they wanted to stay with that person but move to remote, I don't know that they would have it that way either.
So let's go to the other end of the spectrum. We got high school. Let's take somebody who's in an IB program, okay? And let's just call Alex Queen is in an IB program. And so those teachers are specialized in the IB program. will we be able to provide that same, what would be the analogy for Alex Queen in an IB program?
IB and ACE are going to be very challenging. AP has a really clear curriculum for us, but IB and ACE, providing that remotely is going to be extremely challenging. We do not have a solution yet, do we, Steve? We'll do our best, but we don't have a solution. Unless everyone goes remote, then the IB and ACE program will go. Yeah,
Are there other programs, IB and ACE are the ones that come to mind. Are there other programs that we don't have a solution for yet? VPA, that's another one.
Yes, VPA.
Because you're going to have people listening to this, and they're thinking about their own individual situations.
Yeah.
So I think a lot's going to be determined based on surveys. And when we look at, when the surveys come back, we look at the courses that are needed, Mr. Robinson, and determine if we have one or two students in an IB class that are asking for a remote solution, that's going to be very difficult. I'm not saying we can't figure it out, but we're not there at this point in time. If we have 20 looking for that solution that's in IB or ACE or, the VPA classes that you're talking about too, then, we will be able to provide that solution. So I think it's going to get very specific. It is going to be a jigsaw puzzle. It's going to be as we look at the number of students in each section, in each school. We're going to try to staff it by school, maybe opportunities for us to staff it by district if we have to. So if, for instance, if there's two IB programs in Sarasota County, there's one at Venice, there's one at Riverview. So if we have 10 in each school or 5 here and 15 here, then we would be able to blend those together and find a teacher to do that.
I just want to make sure
good questions.
I just want to make sure everybody understands that we're trying to be as flexible.
Yeah.
We're trying to provide for every student every day, but as the permutations increase, it limits our ability to provide all those
We
different
call
options.
it mind-boggling, Mr. Robinson.
You
We
can call me
it-
Eric, Laura. Steve has called me Mr. Robinson.
We call it mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling?
Yes.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Alex King.
And so going through that, I think there's 2 points that I'm glad were clarified. Is that about the district, that when you choice out about not losing your spot. So that is ideal. I think one thing I want to go back to is this is a very fluid situation. So some scenarios that are posed are we also have staff that may be exposed and change. And so my request, I think as a community, we all have to recognize that that's going to change. And there's certainly a incredible desire to keep that continuity for our students as much as possible, but there is a lot of change, or there's a lot of potential for change. So, but as far as the spot, your registered school, if you've choiced, you don't lose that if you choose option 2 as it currently shows. The virtual part, I think, is really important. And then and before I go down that road, because I don't know how long Mr. Henry and Mr. Drennan are with us, I wanted to address something, and I hate to jump around, so I apologize, but I think it's definitely we heard a lot about this, and it is pertaining to graduations, and I appreciate you giving that update, and I do understand how emotionally and challenging it was. I know. And so I just want to make sure the community recognizes how hard those decisions are, and there are people who've missed out on their weddings, there are people, this is just an unprecedented moment. But where the question, I think it's a valid question, is, and I think I know the answer, but for the benefit of this community, the question is, how can we cancel graduations but yet still move forward with opening school? I don't want to. My understanding is right now the Department of Education and the governor have said we are moving forward with the start of school, and that it is, and that the Surgeon General's direction is no group gatherings larger than 50. Is that accurate? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And so within our schools, we are be working within those confines of the direction. Is that accurate? Okay. Because I think that's it's a fair question when someone thinks, how can you do this? But then you're going to open up a school that has 1,000 students in it. And that just shines a little bit more of a light onto the logistics that we haven't necessarily gone through yet. But I just wanted to make sure for anyone watching, because that was a very common question that we all got, understand why, but there will be following those the guidelines of the Surgeon General. Is that correct? Okay, so no, so then,
Absolutely.
yeah, so, okay.
Michael, do you want to address?
So, sure. I wasn't sure if someone was speaking in the room as well. So, yeah, there's kind of two different pieces of guidance, and you were referring to both of them. The one piece is the governor's guidance that schools should open as normal within the time frame, but within these constraints. And so that's one piece of guidance. Schools need to open because that's where kids need to be in a learning environment. There's that guidance, and then there's the second piece of guidance, which is separate from that governor's directive. That is, outside of schools opening, gatherings of greater than 50 people should not be occurring. And there's kind of two exclusive, different guidance, mutually exclusive, different pieces of guidance there. One doesn't build on or oversee the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, I thank you for that clarification. And again, I think I understand the question. I think there's that's a good point, that there's essential activities, because there's a whole discussion about the health ramifications of people staying confined to their home. I can tell you, I think all of us are feeling it and certainly seeing it with our kiddos. But I just wanted to clarify again some of the frequently asked questions. That was one of the major ones. And while you guys, and again, I want to be respectful to your time, and thank you so much for joining us. And I know you guys are working continuously behind the scenes with our staff, so I just really want to thank you all for that work. But the discussion of masks is a really critical one. I know the counties, I know the cities, I know, and but what I believe is, if I think to even just as an individual, but hearing from other families, there are two schools of thought. To mask or not, and it goes both on staff and to not, from classroom management to safety. So, but from a health professional standpoint, what can you add to that? I mean, because there are all, you can read all sorts of different sources, and I don't want to put you on the spot to say that you're going to dictate whether or not the schools determine masks or not. But I think from the science standpoint is if we can continue to ensure social distancing. I mean, can you add some insight as to how we as a board or as a district make that decision when we're thinking about our students and our staff?
Sure. So I think, and Chuck, if you want to step over me, go right ahead. But I think, our intent here is to provide guidance to help the board and the committee make decisions, right? So the intent of masking is to hopefully prevent the spread of the disease, right? And so right now, our recommendation is for individuals to wear masks when social distancing is not possible or difficult, right? And definitely in the school setting, that's going to be the case. So our recommendation would be to wear masks when possible. With that caveat being said, there's going to be certain situations where masks aren't realistic. I know with children that are getting speech therapy, there may be other strategies that need to be taken other than masks, or there may be children that can't wear masks for some type of reason. I would imagine in middle and high school it's going to be easier to get kids to wear masks than maybe some elementary kids. I know I have two that are in elementary school, and I'm training them now to be comfortable wearing a mask for long periods of time. So obviously our recommendation is to wear masks, and I understand it's a very difficult decision as far as making them mandatory. I think that's kind of a decision that has to be made internal, because there's a lot of ramifications and some legal caveats there. But like I said, our recommendation at this time is to, when you can't social distance, wear a mask. We also want to encourage social distancing, and I understand in the school that the planning group is going through a lot of that right now, working all of that out, because the CDC's guidance can be vague at times. This is what we want you to do when possible, or when it's realistic. So we want to wear masks. We want to have social distancing. and you got to plan to do that as best you can within the constraints that exist.
Thank you so much.
Mrs. Brown?
Yeah, I'm hearing, confusion about what they need to do from the parents, not from you, but it's clear that if they've signed up for a choice school or whatever school they're signed up for now is the school they will go to, whether they choose option 1 to come back or option 2, which will be similar but better than what we had at the end of the school year. If they are choiced into a school, because I know they're talking about, no, well, I'll homeschool my kid. Well, I would ask you probably not to do that or not to go to the virtual over going to your choiced school, because you'll lose your spot at your choice school, and you might not be able to come back to that choice school. Is that correct? They'll lose their spot at a choice school. And we want to do this to make it as, because they're talking about a vaccine being available probably by January even. We want these kids to be able to come back to school, or for all of us to be able to resume school normally. And when all of this is over, which it will be, that they'll be able to resume that normally. So the more you change their normal routine when we're coming up to school in the fall, the harder it's going to be for these kids to come back. And, we're hearing from, you talk about the masks, there's some that's saying, well, my kid's not going to wear a mask, because for one reason they're autistic and they can't. Well, we understand that. We'll work with that. And then when they're in a classroom, especially if it's an ESE class or something, they're going to be like a little family in there in some instances. So when they're together, we're going to work with that. But we can't let you on a bus if you're not wearing a mask. And if your child can't wear a mask, they can't be on the bus. The ESE students are a little different. They've got different buses. But these parents who say, I'm not going to put my mask on my kid. I'm not, going to scare them. No, if you don't want your child to wear a mask on the bus, then you better drive your child to school, because we can't allow someone to expose themselves to other children on that bus. We've got to have some rules, just like we have seatbelt rules. Not that they work on a bus, but the seatbelt rules are out there. If you're going to be in a car, you have to have a seatbelt on. If you're going to be on one of these buses during the time of COVID-19, you need to wear a mask. Isn't that accurate? If you're going to be on the bus, you're going to wear a mask? Because you can't social distance on a bus.
Let her answer.
So, in your packet, that's one of the policy level decisions we're going to ask you guys to contemplate and provide us with an answer to on July 14th. And from that, then we will be able to proceed. Brand, I'm sorry, just really quick. Could you just monitor on the chat in case there just happens to be anybody who'd like to ask a question or anything? That would be great, because we can't see it from here. And I don't know, Mr. Henry, did you want to speak on the masking?
Well, I'd be happy to comment on it. And, masks are clearly proven to help slow down and prevent the spread of the virus. And so because of that, we, from a public health perspective, strongly encourage the wearing of masks. Whenever you're out in public and can't be assured you can remain an appropriate distance away from others. And especially important indoors, because we know that transmission occurs more readily in indoor environments than outdoor environments. But it is a tool that helps us slow down or prevent the spread of virus. There are other tools.
And I'm all for that. I'm scared to death for these babies at home that, they've lost their friends and they need to be back. But by the same token, we're not just talking about them, and there are dangers for them, but we're talking about our staff, our custodians, our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, and our staff and teachers. And our teachers are, I'm long in the tooth myself, so I'm okay to talk about that. I'm in the endangered age, and I wear a mask whenever I'm out because I've made the decision I'm going to do that to protect others and protect myself. And I misplace it. I mean, if I take it off and put it back on in here or whatever, I've lost it. It's in the trash can on the floor or something like that. But we are living in an age of ambiguity. And anybody that tells you we're not doesn't understand that that's what we are as teachers, as administrators in this school district. We're our students, our employees is the number one thing for us. So it's a big decision, and I just hope we make the right one.
Laura. Dr. Kingsley, excuse me.
Laura, please. I just wanted to make sure, because I don't know if Chuck has on mandatory masks, not mandatory masks, strongly recommend, or
we strongly recommend but are mandatory during transitions outside of your classroom, whenever you're on the bus, or at all other times when you're not able to maintain a safe distance in school. We know that transitioning between classes, particularly at a high school level, is going to be very difficult to try to stay apart and get to your next class on time. We know that riding on a bus, no matter how many people choose not to, we still only have so many buses and so many drivers, and so we're going to have to put 2 children in a seat. So they're not going to be socially distanced, and so we would think maybe they should probably wear a mask. I will tell you, in a classroom setting, especially for our elementary kiddos, it's, look, I have a mask. Oh no, I have a hat. Oh no, I have something, I mean, it's just, totally, it's just their nature sometimes. So we were trying to think of what can we do so that they can still see their teachers. And a lot of our classrooms, I mean, our families know a lot of our classrooms, in our middle school, every classroom, they're tables. They're not individual desks. So how do you get an environment where it was designed to work together as a team to now be individually separated? So we have these plexiglass partitions between you guys, so we thought about doing that. At the middle schools, it was a more than $500,000 bullet to then destroy all of our middle school furniture, because if we ever got to the point where we could go back to working as teams in the middle schools, without having to have barriers, then we would be taking them down. Do I need to now replace all my furniture because I've kind of destroyed it putting these items in there? So, you know, and as you can imagine, as I'm sure you all are getting, you know, 30, 40 ads a day on different solutions that are available to everybody. There was one from a Florida firm, and so we thought it was a pretty good idea. So this is the larger version. We've procured these. This is 21 inches high, 21 inches wide. Jody has the one that we had customized and made for our elementary kids, which are 18 inches high and 18 inches wide. So they're portable. You can carry them around and take them with you wherever you want to go. But they will also stand up and create a barricaded workspace for the student to work. So, I don't know if anybody can hear me. So ultimately, I can be a student working in my classroom. I can see my teacher. I can see the kids next to me. But I'm contained. Jody. And so I don't feel like they would, at that point, maybe necessarily have to put a mask on. And they can focus on their classrooms. So this is our hope. Again, we've purchased one for every student in the entire school district. The kids can take these with them as they transition in the high school classes and the middle school classrooms. And at the elementary level, the idea is at the end of every day, the student will clean their own and fold it up and put it away or have it sitting on their desk or wherever they're working. And when they come in the morning, they can just open it back up and start their day. So again, for our high school kids, that means they have to, at the end of the day, transition back to that first period classroom to drop it off, which, you know, we'll work through that. But we're hoping that this will help.
I've not seen that particular product and or the data on it. We have looked at a number of different studies where various barriers, plexiglass, and other things are used. They can be quite effective, but it really is a kind of a case-by-case basis depending on the other dynamics in the room. So I don't know that I know enough about those to really give you a solid comment at this point. I don't know if Michael's had a chance to look at those closely.
No, I know that it had been discussed that those were being looked into, but I'm not familiar with the product myself. I'd have to do a little bit of research on it too.
Caroline, can I?
So overall, you know, anytime we can put barriers up that will help prevent the droplet spread, that's a positive thing and will help as it will be effective in reducing the ability of the virus to spread. What's unknown is in each particular classroom, what are the air circulations and currents, and how close or far apart will the students be with these barriers or not. And as an example, in the settings we work with so far, as people return to work, where they might be in the course of their duties interviewing someone else, person after person, say a psychologist or psychiatrist. If the office room is small, the plexiglass can be a barrier, but if they're talking face to face and neither is masked for long periods of time in a small office, then the longer they're together, the less effective that barrier becomes without masks also in place. So there's a lot of dynamics to think about with the barriers that we'd have to look at, in terms of the spaces they're used in and the length of time.
Oh, Mrs. Zaylor.
Thank you. I was curious about, I know all of them are mitigation tools, and right? So face shields, particularly as we think of our ESC students, as was addressed, is that, and can you speak to the difference between mask coverings versus face shields versus partitions, as far as a comparison? Again, I think I recognize all of them are mitigation tools. Some are more effective than others, can you speak to face shields and their benefits?
So generally speaking, masks are the most effective at the purpose of trying to contain the potential spread of virus from someone that might be asymptomatic. Face shields are very effective barriers to prevent things from coming into someone's face. That's what they were intended for. They're not quite as effective, and CDC has said they've not studied them enough to know whether or not they're as effective as face masks, and so they're not recommending shields in lieu of masks for the general public at this point. I've not seen studies that compare face shields, cloth masks, and other barriers directly, so it's hard for me to comment on that. But you're absolutely correct, Commissioner. They're all mitigation tools, and each mitigation tool helps create a safer environment. Although everything about this virus is so new, I don't know that we have real clear data to tell us how much safety you're giving up with each level of mitigation.
No, I think fair point, and thank you for bringing that up as we navigate it, because there's just so many unknowns. My other question is more so for staff and maybe our general counsel, but I know certainly staff, I mean, we're getting a lot of responses or questions and concerns from staff. And going back to the survey, I understand the intent was twofold, not, get a sense of what the families and communities feeling and their comfort level. Now we're talking about what safety protocols we're going to require to the extent that we can as a board, and July 14th, that would include masks and what that looks like. And then second would be, how, also, I'm sorry, going back to the survey, is how we staff, because there are members of our staff that are at a higher risk or concern, and trying to manage that. From a requirement standpoint, going to masks, if that's the decision, and again, we have to look at what the policy, how we draft that. So, but can you talk through what our allowances are? So, and then the second question was about testing our staff. I know state and federal employees, for example, are tested. I believe it's a mandatory every 2 weeks. I don't know if they could confirm that. Is that anything that we've talked about at all? A couple questions.
Well, I can start with, if you want to mandate masks, I believe that you could do that as a board by, at least in the short term, passing an emergency rule to do that. Obviously, I've read anecdotally in the paper that there are some legal challenges to masks, so we may get some guidance on that, but I frankly don't see a legal reason why you can't do that. You mandate other coverings of parts of bodies. You would have to recognize that there would be certain exceptions, and we'd have to have a process for that. But it would be my thought that yes, you could mandate masks for staff or students, or both. I think somebody else has to address part 2 of that question.
Well, I'm going to ask either Chuck Henry or Michael Drennan to comment on testing, because it's one of the options we've talked about extensively, and so there are just some difficulties wrapped around requiring that, so offering that as a school district. So Michael or Chuck, would you comment on that?
Unfortunately, I've got to step off the call, but I'll let Chuck answer that question. I'm sorry. I just have another commitment that I have to get to.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to respond via email or phone at any time.
So, in terms of testing and using testing as a strategy to monitor illness, and in a perfect world, we'd have a lab that had the capacity and the materials to test as often as we would want to, and then we would have a really good picture of what is the level of virus circulating in a particular school or across the district. But the reality of where we're at as a community, and essentially as a state and the nation, is that the capacity continues to be stressed. Capacity is a lot better now for testing than it was several months ago. But even as the capacity came up, are the state-run sites at Robert L. Taylor and the University Town Center Mall. The results have been turning around relatively rapidly up until, I'd say, about 7 or 8 days ago. But as we saw illness spike, not only here, but across the state, and the demand for testing related to that dramatically increased rapidly. The labs are struggling to keep up, and the results have slowed down to 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 days coming back, which is really problematic for our public health work. So I think testing is a good strategy, but in order to be really viable, we would have to secure pretty much dedicated space with the lab, and the contracts would have to ensure that there was adequate quick turnaround on those times, and then you'd have to have the funding in place. Typically, the cost for testing is you can ballpark it at about $100 a test. By the time you get the supplies, pay for the lab piece to be run, and the staff to manage taking the samples and delivering the results. So $100 a test times however many you want to do every week or 2 weeks, you can see that price tag run up really, really quick. So that's another strong consideration to think about.
Mrs. Brown?
My question has to do with testing also, but it's towards Ms. Kingsley. End of course exams. We didn't get to, the students didn't get to take an end of course exam before they went home. And is that going to be waiting for them when they come back?
I sure hope not.
Oh, we don't have an answer from DOE yet.
No.
Oh, geez.
No, they have been suspended. And so what we will be doing, our teachers will hopefully be collaborating on common assessments for coursework and grade level, and giving kids not high-stake tests, but assessments that will help them determine where do they start with the children to fill in any gaps and to accelerate every single child. So that will be happening at the beginning of the year. But end of course exams were suspended.
For last year?
For last year.
Thank you.
What about the SAT, the PSATs on the SATs? Some of them were canceled. Are they going to be? I know my grandson is trying to take it, and he hasn't been able to.
So the PSAT is scheduled into the fall. There's been no determination made on that. I would assume if we're back in school, we would probably be able to give the PSAT. The SAT for the summer is suspended. We do not have a SAT for July, and that's been a bit problematic for some of our students who are trying to boost their score for the Bright Futures. But the ACT is being offered in July. I don't have the exact date with me. I don't know. Deb Jacqueline is not there. Okay, anyway. So anyway, we will be offering in many of our schools the ACT for students, and they can use that to boost their Bright Future score as well as for college admissions.
What about SATs?
SATs will not be.
I'm sorry, not SATs, PSATs.
PSAT will, right now, I would assume they're going to be offered in the fall. There's been no determination on that. I don't know why they would be suspended unless we just don't go back to school, and there's no way to offer those.
Well, right now they're not scheduled.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
They are not scheduled in our school district yet, but
Right.
I would assume we would be able to get those scheduled.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Wasn't there an amendment? I thought the governor amended something as it pertained to the Bright Futures through June 30th? Okay.
Through June 30th, but I will tell you there has been an appeal sent to ask for an extension because it was expected that the administration would happen, and it didn't. So, but I'm not sure if that will.
So right now it's expired on June, but there's okay.
I think
so.
that's
Stay
what it is.
tuned.
So basically, for the SAT, children who were trying to raise their SAT score to increase their level of the Bright Future Scholarship, they didn't get the opportunity to take the administration in June, and then they'll be starting college in August. So I think that was what the issue was. I was trying to find, I have a bunch of stuff on the ACT on my phone, well, in an email. And it's a date in July, because it was 18th. It was, because a third of the schools have said they're not, that would normally have the administration aren't going to do it. They still have 2/3. So like in our county, our comprehensive high schools, all but Booker, are offering the ACT. So.
When are they offering it?
Find the exact date. July 18th? Okay, so it's July 18th.
I just have one more, and then I'm going to stop, because one more question as far as timeline, because as
Can I finish?
Sure.
All right, if it's on July 18th at every high school?
Except for Booker High School, the 5 companies. So it's at Riverview,
Okay,
Venice,
so from the kids
Northport.
from Booker, because that's where my grandson goes, can the kids from Booker go to the other high schools to take it?
That's probably where they've signed up to take it, is at one of the other schools. It was just not being offered at Booker, so they would take it at Sarasota or Riverview or wherever was convenient.
Mrs. Ziegler?
I'm sorry. I just, but for the sense of time as too, as I know people want to speak as well. So as a board, we have some decisions as we look ahead to a very unknown future, as all of us do. If you were to reverse, I know you've outlined some of those decisions, but also what would be our, and this again is fluid, but ideally the time in which we would like families or need families to make this decision. Do we have that date? And I mean, if we don't, that's fine. We can still work towards that. I just wanted to clarify.
Go ahead.
We are hoping for the end of the first week that we come back, so the end of the week of the July 13th, that we'll have a letter to our families saying, please, if you're going to sign up for remote, do so then. The date for signing up for virtual was July 16, but I know that they're willing to extend that, so we can work on extending that date too.
And you mean true virtual, not Sarasota virtual, which is a choiced option. You are no longer a Sarasota County School District student. You are, whether it's Sarasota virtual or Florida virtual. And that was
July 16, but we will be extending that.
Okay. And we are set to vote on some of these elements, more so it's risk mitigation policies for staff and students on the 14th. So then a notification would go out on the 13th, but it would be, and this is not.
It's not on the 13th. It would go out after the discussions with the board on the 14th, so the 15th, 16th, 17th.
So it could include whatever the final decision is. So that, thank you very much.
So that they can make the best informed decision, because we'll have had the policy decisions from the board that then the families will be able to use to make their decisions. I see that the union is on here also, so if they had any comments that they'd like to make, because again, decisions that the board makes at the policy level will then, obviously impact staff. And so there is a concern about if we're saying we're doing so many things, then do we extend the amount of time that staff have been allowed to, because, we have a time certain for personal leave. If you want to take off for the whole next year, you can do that, but, how do we go about doing that, or do we modify some of our policies to allow them to return earlier as we're having more kids come into our schools? I mean, there's lots and lots of decisions to be made, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
Is that Sid? I can't see who's there.
Yeah.
Is that Sid?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know. Oh,
there's Pat.
And there's Pat. So I didn't know if any of them wanted to just kind of speak or provide any comments or anything on their concerns or issues.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Pat.
Okay. First I want to thank Jane for saying what she did about the staff, because a lot of email from teachers and staff that are scared. Yeah.
Get closer.
Hey,
Closer to the mic.
Pat, we're having a harder time understanding. Okay, there you go.
you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Okay. I've been getting a lot of email from teachers and staff that are scared to death, and I think you probably have gotten it too. And I'm going to just vent. I wanted to thank Jane for saying that, because I was hoping somebody would say what she said. And I know you all have been put in this predicament. It's just a no-win, everything. And so I'm not talking about you when I'm venting, but I just feel like teachers and staff are being put on the front lines with doctors and nurses and EMT people and some police officers. And they haven't been trained how to work with contagious individuals. And some of them are going to die. And we need to think about staff and what's happening to them. I understand our job has always been to think about students, and we all think that way because that's how we've always thought. But now it means life or death. It means a lung transplant. It means a bad heart for the rest of your life. It means a lot of things. It means even young children I'm seeing more of things happening to. It just worries me to death that something's going to happen to a lot of our staff. On the other side, I was wondering, have we surveyed substitutes to see if they're coming back, because we can't get poll workers because they're older and they don't want to die either. And a lot of, I think our subs are older. So have we seen our subs going to come in? Because if you have some sick teachers and they're not there, what are you not going to, you're going to put 2 classes of 15 together or 2 classes of 18? You can't do that. Now you've got too many kids in the class. It's just, I'm scared to death and I don't know the answer. I'm hoping you'll push it back till after Labor Day, just my thought. I'm hoping we go remote as much as we can for people, and we really take into consideration people who have babies at home and sick mothers at home, and they're not well. I mean, I'm worried about our insurance since we're self-insured and taking a hit too. I'm just worried about all of this. And I know you're thinking about staff too, but please always keep it in mind because they are scared to death. They really are. I have no answer. Sorry.
Thanks, Pat. And so with that, I guess the first policy or decision that we would need from you is, how do we open schools? Are we going to open schools just, under the advice of the governor, we need to get back to brick and mortar, face-to-face instruction, open our schools. So that's kind of option 1. We're just opening our campuses and putting every safety precaution we can in place. Or 2, we open schools to traditional brick and mortar on August 10th, which is the day we're due to start school, and provide remote learning opportunities for our families who make that choice, which right now I think was 24% of our families. 21% of our families, which may change depending. It's interesting, though, I will tell you, I thought that the results of this survey would be very, very different from what we saw at the end of the school year, at the end of May, because things were quite different. We'd started to kind of ramp down a little bit. It was like the flattening of the curve, or whatever you could say, at that particular point in time. So at that particular point in time, it was parents were like, oh my God, I'm so tired of this remote learning, or I can't plan it. I need my kids to get back in school. So I thought these results, based upon all the spiking, would be quite different, and they're exactly the same, pretty much. So, which is interesting. So again, that's another option. Or we open remotely on August 10th. I don't know that I necessarily want to not open school on the day we're due to open, because it becomes a whole changing of the calendar. It modifies a lot of plans for our parents. For students who wish to actually graduate a semester early and start college early, they won't be able to do that if we push the start date back or later. So we'd open remotely as of August 10th, but return to traditional brick and mortar after Labor Day. Or if the spike is still continuing, then we come back and we discuss it, making it another later date. But at that particular point, I think if that's the choice that you make, we have got to really get to work to make sure that the remote learning is as good as we can get it, as if you're in front of a teacher. Because there are concerns about whether or not the state will fund us for remote learning, because you're not necessarily in front of a student. I mean, we're not able to get CARES Act funding or GEARS Act funding because it's not direct, face-to-face, in-person instruction. So now they've ramped that back, because that was 100%, it had to be in person. And we did our entire summer boost program to get to those kids remotely. So now they've changed it to 60%? 75%? 75% face-to-face. But they've extended it till October, so we're hoping that if we do open our doors, we can get these kids and get them face-to-face and get them some additional supports if needed. So that's kind of the first level, and if you have another choice or option that you want us to weigh through, I guess that we could do that, but.
Do you want us to make this decision now?
July 14th.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because the way you're talking about it sounds like it's now, and I heard July 14th, but then you talk about needing the information, so needing the information, I don't know why we have to wait till July 14th. I'm pretty sure you're waiting for additional information.
No, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of contemplate.
I've contemplated it.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I know where I am.
So I don't know if the other board members feel the same way, but I didn't want to put anybody on the spot to have to make a decision today as we're talking about it. Oh, and I need it now. I mean, that wasn't fair to any of you. So, but yes, that's the kind of the first one we need to talk about.
There's 3 of you on, Shirley, so wait.
Do you want me to just go through all of the things that we're hoping to get?
I have 3 people who want to speak up here.
Oh, okay. Well,
Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, I want to wait to make a decision because I'm still looking to see how these numbers go up. I keep hoping every day that it's going to be a lot lower, and most days it's not. But that's one of the criteria for me, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. But what about surveying our teachers and staff?
Do we do that?
After the 14th?
I think we need to do that.
Yeah.
Well, today or tomorrow, or
we want to wait and see your decisions.
Well, I think we need to survey our staff and our teachers and see how they feel about this, because it's really important to me as to what they think. And if they don't feel safe and they feel like this is, a matter of, and I feel that way sometimes. I'm going to tell you, I don't even like coming in here. But I really think that we need to get some input from them. I would really like that.
See, I agree, because I think it'd be very difficult for us to make a decision without knowing what there are teachers, what the response is from the teachers. So I really think we need that feedback first.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
So, if you decide we're going back traditional and with an option of remote, we need to make sure we have demand for the remote. So just because a teacher wants to go remote, but if we don't have children whose families want them to go remote, then, we have to use the demand to fill the capacity with the teachers.
So what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the situation.
Got it. But I think we need to, out of respect, ask them what they're thinking and what they think we should do. Because they all have opinions, because they're telling me about their opinions. I'm getting a number of texts and emails from them saying, hey, please don't have us go back or do something different. And I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I want to make the right decision. I don't have a child in school. I have a grandchild in school. But I want to make sure that we make the right decision. And if 30% of our teachers say not coming back or get sick, then that's on us, I feel like, if we haven't really included them. So we need to include them. And I know everybody is off the rest of the week. Maybe we can do this when we come back.
Well, I mean, we can definitely do it. I think, like Dr. Kingsley was saying, the issue becomes if I have a school where I have, 7th grade social studies or something, but I don't have enough 7th graders at that school. I have a teacher who doesn't want to come into work, but I don't have enough to make a class. I'm not going to be able to offer that remotely, unfortunately. I think is at a high school. If I have 2 kids who are taking chemistry, then but I have 2 chemistry teachers who want to work remotely. So it's trying to fill the holes with the teachers that we have. And again, I think the decisions, because Pat's absolutely right, there are many teachers who are fearful, is that once we know what the decisions are, then we can then have our teachers, that's the extension of personal leave, if they choose that they want to do personal leave because they just don't feel comfortable coming into the office. So, or if we're opening remotely, they may want to do the work, but then they may want to not come back if we choose to open. So then we'd have to basically be staffing again. So there's so many questions because, overwhelming majority of parents, based on this survey or this preference, is they want to be back in brick and mortar. So,
Excuse me a minute, Missy. There's number of respondents, 18,000 respondents. We have 43,000 kids.
Absolutely.
So,
where's Denise? She'll say statistically we can extrapolate out that the information is pretty
The end score for that is pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
Mr.
Confident.
Robinson, you want to speak?
Well, yeah, sure. I'll like to speak. But I was just saying, an 18,000 survey of 43,000 is pretty statistically significant.
Oh, I know that, but it's still 43,000.
I mean, if you look at the Z-score for an 18,000 survey, even although it wasn't a random survey, I got to think that the confidence level is pretty low, pretty high, and the error rate would be pretty low. Just talking numbers. So can we get to what Pat brought up? Pat's issue. So you talked about some of the things to protect students, and I guess by extension, those mitigating factors help teachers too. But are there any mitigating factors that mitigating tools that we're going to be doing directly related to not just teachers, staff, workers? Because, I mean, take a custodian, for example. Their job is to touch the spots that nobody else wants to touch, to clean. So
maybe they won't have to.
I mean, my question isn't just about custodians. My question is about staff in general, because we need to go into the issue that Mitzi just talked about. There are schools that only have one physics teacher. There's a lot of schools that only have one physics teacher, and so we can, if we don't make sure that physics teacher feels safe and secure in going back to school, that's going to have a ripple effect, and so. We need to make sure that, but not just the physics teacher, custodian, cafeteria worker. I mean, it goes on and on. So what type of mitigating factors are we going to have for staff in general? And could you be specific about some of the different buckets, I mean, to discuss?
So I'll just talk first. We've received 4 pallets of white cloth face masks. So every employee in the entire school district will receive 5 cloth face masks to wear. Again, your decision decides whether they have to wear it or they can, they strongly recommend it, but we're providing them. Again, we're going to have these barriers for those students to have. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Jody because we have made some purchases in terms of cleaning equipment. So let's go ahead.
So thank you very much. Great question. So obviously we want all staff to feel as comfortable as possible, and so we've gone ahead and let me thank Tracy Brizantine in our warehouse for helping us out with this. But Mitzi's exactly right. So we've got a stockpile of masks for employees. We've got gloves for employees if they request them. We also have a smaller stockpile of face masks should they request them and need them. Shields should they request them and need them. In terms of in the classroom, in your spaces, we've got bottles of our Alpha Cleaner in every space throughout the district. And so we're going to encourage cleaning throughout the day. We've got paper towels in those locations. And so also in custodial services, we've purchased also the N95. So if we do get a situation like we talked about earlier, we get a report of a positive COVID case in a school, then that strike team that we're calling that are going to go in and clean that school are going to have the higher level N95 masks. So we've got those available ready to go. And in terms of cleaning for custodial, we've also purchased some misters and sprayers that every school will have one of those, and so that makes the process a lot quicker in terms of that sanitation that we need to do, that disinfection. And again, this is a list that's evolving. So as we are learning more and seeing what employees need as they come back, and as we work with the health department in terms of what those protective measures need to be, we are certainly as a district trying to make sure we have them.
Jody, a lot of elementary schools have one-day custodian, and so you have places that are getting constantly touched throughout the day, but you have one-day custodian. That's how it's been historically. Is that how it's going to be going forward?
It's a great question too. Yeah. So for custodial services, we've always focused on nightly cleaning, but we've got to shift a little bit here. And so, and let me just say from custodial perspective, in terms of what happens during the day at school, it is going to be a team effort. And so we've had multiple conversations with Dr. Kingsley and her team about how staff at the school, teachers, administrators, students in the classrooms, how can they help us with that constant cleaning throughout the day, because we just don't have enough custodians on staff to continually do that. So our strategy right now is we're going to bring an additional person on day shift, probably at a mid-shift type position off of nights, to help support some of that in schools. We are going to be working with administrators and staff and teachers in classrooms to say, we need to have kids wiping down desks consistently during the day. That's why those products are in classrooms. They're environmentally friendly green products that we can use with students. So it's really, to answer your question, Mr. Robertson, it's going to be a team effort. We will have an additional custodian on days to help out, but it's going to be an all hands on deck, trying to make sure we're wiping surfaces, wiping doorknobs, wiping cafeteria tables consistently throughout the day. On the back side, because again, we only have so many custodians now, we're shorting the night crews, and so we are ramping up, trying to hire as many as we can to backfill those positions on nights, because a key thing that we're very, very concerned about is in a normal year, there are times throughout the year, flu season, whatever that looks like, where custodial staffing will get short on a nightly basis. So we're not anticipating that to get better this year. So we are trying to ramp up staff. But we are concerned that if we get a situation where we have too many people on days, or we get a lot of custodians out because they're sick or ill or whatever's going on, we need to be able to turn those classrooms around, turn those schools around for next day, and make sure parents are confident that we've cleaned them to a high level every night. So again, it's going to be a partnership. So in classrooms, one of the things is you think about a custodial route. The first part of a custodial route is nothing more than getting into every classroom, every space, and pulling trash, pulling recycling. That'll take an hour and a half out of custodians' routes. So can we work with classrooms to say, hey, can the kids help us just pull the trash out of the garbage can, set it in the hallway? That saves a lot of time. And so that at night we're looking at what activities can we get help with, so that custodians can focus on the things they need to focus on, which are the touch points, the desktops. So what we're asking custodial teams to do is an increased level of service this year. We're anticipating there's going to be some absenteeism there. So again, all hands on deck. How can we look at this from a global perspective, that everybody's focusing on cleanliness throughout the day, and how do we get it turned around for the next school day so parents are confident it's been cleaned every night? So,
but I just want to make sure you recognize, if you're asking the kids to wipe off the tables, it's going to cause the trash to fill up quicker, and so they're going to have to take the trash out in the middle of the day. There's going to be a trash bag sitting outside. Absolutely. And then another one towards the end of the day.
All of those.
As you guys are fanatical about cross-contamination. You guys are obsessed with it, and so you guys want to make sure that when you wipe it down, you get another cloth, and so. Yeah.
And I think, Mr. Robinson, you pointed out a great example of what your team has been struggling with throughout the last couple of months, that as you take a look at what are the measures going to be, as simple as having students help wipe down desks on a daily basis, that's more trash. How do we get the trash out? So there are all these things and plans that need to be laid in place that take a lot of time to do this. So that's a great example of just one thing that we need to consider as we move forward.
But I just want to implore you to make sure that you communicate out to staff that we are concerned about their safety, and that we are doing things to mitigate the risk to them. We need to, I know you guys are doing a yeoman's job, but you got to communicate the job you guys are doing to the staff, because the higher level of comfort that they have, you're going to increase the number of teachers that show up, which makes the rest of the job easier. If you guys do a lot of work and you don't communicate to staff of all the stuff you're doing, the ripple effect could be catastrophic for the district. So communication, because I know you guys are doing a great job of doing it, so I don't need to harp on that. You just need to, I know you guys aren't really good at this, but you guys need to toot your own horn and let people know what you're doing.
So I would say toot. We've got
But it's internal
Good point.
communication.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that, and I'm looking at...
Jody, I'm talking about internal communication.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Craig and I, Craig Manigula, our new director of communications, this is a conversation that we had not more than a week ago about internal communication. I think that's one of the areas we really can improve the level of service. So we're really going to be tapping Craig and his communications team as we move forward for that internal communications, because we've struggled with that. You're absolutely right. But for everybody to feel comfortable that they're in a clean, safe work environment, we're going to need Craig and his team to help us with that. So you hit the nail on the head. We've had those conversations, and I think that, you know, as a team, we're really geared up for the 14th conversation with all of you, and then that will really set us off in terms of really that July implementation piece where we really nail down what we're doing, how we're doing it, internal communication, external communication.
Jody, it's not just...
Robinson,
I got the floor.
No, you have
yes,
two
I still have
other
the floor.
people.
The internal communication also can rest with Pat Gardner. I mean, she had grave concerns in those, and making sure you include her in the internal communications is important.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So there's a chat.
There are two other people ahead of you, and it's really not fair for you. Yes, you did, but after you did what you wanted to do, you have to respect your peers.
I had the floor,
Mrs. Brown, you didn't have the floor. Mrs.
Yes, ma'am,
Brown.
I did.
I can't read it from here.
I'm just tired of it.
Mitzi, I'm Ms. Cochran. How many employees have been back at school, and for how long? I mean, not at the district. They haven't been at some of them at the schools. Not how many in numbers, but we've had some back at the district. For how long?
Oh, we started gradually coming back from the work at home June 15th. They came back 2 days, then the 22nd, 3 days, and this week they're working 4 days with the expectation that everybody is fully back to work regular schedules in the office on July 13th when we return. Our custodial staff were back 5 days a week, June 8th or June 15th, I think. And that, you know, I mean, the 11-month staff left for their summer break on June 22nd was their last working day. They'll return July 21st. Our teacher's last day was June 2nd, I think, and they come back August 3rd.
I think a lot of us can see just by, and I mean no offense, but I think we can see by looking at your face and looking at Laura's face and Jody and Steve. I've never seen you looking so tired and worn out. You know,
I mean,
oh, Laura.
Yeah, there you go. But you all have been working, and you know, it's not even that you're coming in every day. I mean, you're working late into the night. I mean, I know when I send you emails at 11 o'clock, you know, I'm like, what is she up for? But you know, those things are happening. And I don't think we've had any cases in the district offices yet, have we, from those people who are working? And I think perhaps we can get some direction from the Department of Health. Just by being in a room, you're not going to get it. You have to get in contact with the virus. Now, if somebody with the virus sneezes, a lot of people in the room have a problem. And if that person sneezes with a mask on, there's less of a problem. And if that person sneezes with a mask on and you have a mask on too, there's even less of a problem. But if that person doesn't sneeze, it's harder because singing and talking, I mean, I probably spit out things when I talk. Those things can come. But if you've got the mask, or if you stay 6 feet away from me, you can still hear me, but you're still 6 feet away. The chances of you catching anything are down. If they're on surfaces, to get from that surface into you, it's got to go through your nose or your mouth and from your face. I mean, so if you're washing your hands, you cut that down. And I think there's a lot of ways that staff and each one of us can take responsibility to make sure that we don't, because I haven't gotten sick, and you know, we haven't been, but you're in your home and you try to keep that. And I think we want to try to keep that when we're in a classroom. those students are kind of like in their little family too. So we want to keep them together. It's not going to be we're coming back and we're going to have all these people together again. We're going to try to keep those groups small as much as we can. It's going to be harder in high school and middle school. It's just going to be there, but I think we need to make sure that we don't spread fear unnecessarily, but we do spread the caution. And we all have to take some responsibility for making sure we stay healthy, that we wear our masks when we're out and we can't. And I think that's important. And that the steps that Jody is taking, I think sometimes some of us will be safer in the school than we are at our home, or definitely than when we are out at the grocery store or out at Walmart. So, and they're taking precautions too, and we've all been out there. So I think, you know, we need to take a breath. And I know it's going to be so hard to try to figure out where we're going to put those kids when they come back. And it'll be difficult if our students or our teachers don't come back. And I don't know how you're going to try to put those in those classrooms and how you're going to figure that all out. And when you've got parents deciding they're going to put their kids in and then they're going to take them out, put them in, you know, that's going to be difficult. We're going to want them to make those decisions, but have an understanding that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe, and we expect our staff and our students to do what they can to participate and help us and get those things done. And we can share some of those things when we communicate also. It's a team effort. We all have to work together, but we can do it.
Yeah, I agree. So I just wanted to say, one of the task force members had wanted you to be aware that the school-based tech supports were required to come back to work 5 days a week beginning May 18th. So, because they are 12-month staff, so they're in our schools every day. And then I have a comment for you, Jody, that I'll give you about
Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you. I have four questions, but and I'm trying to keep them bucketed, but again, recognizing that I think Chuck's still with us. And there's been a discussion about, and Mrs. Goodwin brought it up too, and I can't reiterate what Mrs. Brown just said, that I mean, and you can see it. And I think this is the value of having this a public discussion, because it is one question answered and brings up 17 more. And it's hard. So I feel the pain and I feel the exhaustion, and I know she's not up till 11, she's up till 3 or so in the morning, and so we have to be cautious of burnout too for everyone. But one question I had is, it pertains to flu season, and there is a lot of discussion about if you and I am no health expert, so again, that's why I'm going to get some sense of is there any data or anything that would support, I mean, the herd immunity so we've had lots of people inside, and then we open up schools, 70%, let's just say hypothetically, go back to brick and mortar. I'm not going to even address all the other questions. This is scenario. And we will likely have some volatility of contagion. If you were to delay it and it starts to match up with flu season, which I certainly believe has been a discussion. I mean, and again, I don't know if it's studied, so I completely respect if you can't give that answer. But, you know, is that increasing the risk at that point, because you'll have a mass population of people who have really not been exposed to anyone outside of their family or Publix if they're masking and following proper protocol. But if we delay, is there a heightened risk, I guess is my point, I'm sorry, if we delay and then till after Labor Day, for example, and then the start of flu season is combined with the mass exposure of students, and that's probably not the right term, but opening of schools.
So this is Chuck. I'll try to address that.
Sorry for giving you tough questions today.
That's okay. And let me preface this by saying I'm not referencing a particular study. I'm just trying to answer based on many, many years of experience in public health. And I don't believe that there'd be an increase in risk in terms of transmission of the virus, COVID-19. But what will occur, and it's going to occur whether you open in August or defer to a later point, when flu season arrives, we are going to have a real challenge differentiating between influenza and COVID, and more than likely, we're going to be excluding children and staff with influenza until we're certain it's not COVID. And the confluence of those two things together are going to really ramp up the challenges that we all have in terms of keeping everybody healthy at school and understanding which is flu and which is in COVID-19. From a public health perspective, they both create a tremendous amount of risk for those employees that are considered at risk for either one, and that's our older population and those with underlying health risks. Influenza and pneumonia takes its toll every year, and the data is still out on whether or not COVID-19 is a heavier burden in terms of illness and mortality than COVID-19 versus flu and pneumonia. But them occurring at the same time is going to create great challenges, and I don't know how we avoid that, because flu season will come regardless of what else is going on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that insight. I don't think that there's any decisions we make on that, but I think it's an important point that certainly has been discussed in the public arena. I'm going to try to make the quickest ones here. There is a question, and we don't about. I know this was addressed, and I talked to Mr. Hardy about it. Is there a waiver in some of the FAQs or the release plan? So it's not a waiver. It's intended, going back to what Mrs. Brown said, that to include awareness as to how important it is for every family to recognize that in order for this to work for the community, everyone has to take that responsibility. And we, recognizing, and I believe more and more employers are being much more cautious than before this all transpired. So many times families would be like, I can't take off work. My child's going to go to school sick or with the temperature, give Tylenol, etc. That is what that intention was. It's not a waiver of liability. It's not a hold harm. It's nothing like that. And that, I just want to make sure, and again, for the public standpoint, that's what that was. There's no contractual waiver or liability transfer.
People will not be asked to sign any kind of release to come to school. They are being asked to sign releases for extracurricular activities, which are voluntary in nature, which no one has to do, but they can do if they wish, and that's part of the situation where they're coming to do extracurriculars, but certainly not simply to come to school. They're going to be reminded of best practices and good protocols, and really asked to participate as part of the school community to keep not only themselves, but their teachers and their friends safe.
Thank you. I had a question for Jody. How many of our staff have, or maybe, I don't know if Jody's the right one, have requested extended leave? And then the next question was, there's a lot of questions about whether or not we could do a hybrid of distance learning. So I just want to make, because that's a hot topic as far as there are other districts doing it. I've gone through and read, but from a logistics standpoint and how we've looked at that, I know it's certainly been discussed, but if that's something you guys can talk through.
So I'll comment quickly on the leave. So we have extended the personal leave window a couple of times. There have been a few people who have inquired about it. I apologize. I could get you that number. I don't have it. We are having conversations now, I know, with SCTA as we move forward, as we get these plans more concrete, then I'm sure that's something we're going to reopen again for our staff that make more, again, a decision about, do I want to stay home for the year? So you certainly will see that reopen again, I think, as we get closer.
Okay, thank you.
So similar to our parents needing more information before they can make an informed decision, this allows us to get some more information to our staff so they can make an informed decision. I will tell you, the last personnel report I saw that came out this week was maybe 4 or 5 personal leaves.
4 or 5 people
that were on there. And then I just wanted to let you know that we received verification. So thank you to those other people in the audience who knew that the ACT was July 18th. So thank you for that. And the PSAT is October 14th.
Okay, thank you.
In connection with the hybrid model, which we went back and forth I can't even tell you. You have to weigh the pros and cons and what's the purpose. So in a high school, the purpose, initially the purpose was, can we get 6-foot distancing in schools? That's when we first started talking about the hybrid model. And as Jody's team found out, we can get 6-foot distancing in all of our elementary schools and all but one of our middle schools. High schools, most of them, all but I think Booker High and Polytech, it was going to be challenging. So we started talking about, should we do an A week or where children come to school for a week and then the following week it's all remote without teacher direction, because on the B week, the teachers have the other half of the class. So, if we're trying to make sure that we can, during transition times and lunchtime, have our high schoolers separated as much as possible, we would need to have fewer kids on campus. And, that may become something. It's not in our plan, but as we have had this spike now in cases, it may be something that comes up. And I'm glad we have until July 14th, because in this next, week, I'm imagining that we will have a lot more data. The downside is the children are with their teacher half the time. The teacher is presenting curriculum, half the curriculum, and the other time they are working completely independently without teacher direction, which we did not do during the ICANN plan. They still had teacher direction. And we would only consider that at this point with our high school kids. But Steve and I were actually in a very healthy dialogue, spirited dialogue about this with Mitzi this afternoon.
Quite spirited right before we came in here, actually. So
it is definitely something to consider, but you really do need to weigh the pros and cons. For me, it's a lot of cons, but if we can't keep our high schoolers, distanced, maybe there are some options. We have some of them in the plan.
And I recognize that also, because from a macroeconomic standpoint could be incredibly disruptive to our families, to anyone listening or watching, that is a major factor. And so
I'm going to put my CFO hat on now, and it could be incredibly financially disruptive to the school district, because we have yet to know whether we would receive funding, because these children are not actually being instructed, they're being instructed on their own. So there is a concern that we would, because the word robust in terms of remote learning and distance learning has been the big word that we're hearing. And so I don't know how robust it is as if it's all self-directed. And that would be the concern, because virtual school is pretty much self-directed. We don't receive any funding for virtual school unless they successfully complete. So unlike, counting the students in the seats, and that's how we earn our funding, I would worry if they were only in school half the time, if we would end up only getting half the funding of a student. So again, it's a waiver. I will tell you, I sit on a statewide finance council. We have sent a request to the Commissioner of Education on specific waivers. That is one big one. It was I think the first one. Particularly if we have to shut down a school or a class and they have to move to remote learning. If it's their teacher who actually is ill, then we have to have somebody else teaching them. Again, so many questions, but that is one other concern. Okay, now I'm back to Superintendent.
And can I just add to that? There are a lot of districts doing that, and we have resisted because we don't think that's the best thing for our children. So if we get to the point that we have to do it, we will. Steve's wanted to pre-plan that and think that through, but I publicly apologized because I kept thinking, no, we don't have to go there, so let's just hold off. But now he and his team of principals are going to be up a creek if we have to plan that, because it's a scheduling nightmare. You want to make sure you have all of the children from the same family on the same days. It's
especially if they have to be home to watch their sibling or not home.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then there is Because it could be, if I'm on an A schedule and a B schedule, it doesn't mean that the teacher doesn't still have 25 kids in this period and 0 in the next. It's not, because you can't take every single student's schedule. You have 2,500 kids in a school, and you're trying to individualize each schedule and say, well, you're A and you're B, and think that you're going to be able to divide those classes in half. So while the campus as a whole may have half as many students, the teacher may still have just as many students in their classroom, depending on which schedule that student's, if they're on an A or a B. So, because they transfer between 7 different classes. So,
Sure.
Can I jump in just a second?
Mm-hmm.
So
Jump in there,
There
Steve.
has been a lot of conversation about this in our districts in the state that are doing it. Alternate day schedule, and there's several versions. All I would like to caution and say is that if we make that determination, it's going to take time to schedule that. It's going to take a lot of time to schedule that. And so, I always tell the master schedulers at high school and middle school, it really is like rocket science. It's an amazing conglomeration of a number of things that have to happen to get a regular schedule. And if you try to split classes in half all the way across the schedule, it's even more difficult. They can do it. They will do it. They'll do anything we have to do to make this work. Just understand that if that's a decision we make, then we need time to put that in place.
And can I just add one more thing? So it kind of leads to another decision we're hoping that you will consider, and that is this whole new way of working and being ready to spontaneously shut down and go remote, and our expectation that we have really high-quality lessons for our children every day, whether it's remote or not. It's going to require our teachers to do a hefty amount of planning, to change their mindset to a whole new way of collaborating, even allowing them to collaborate in school, where, like at a high school, they don't have the same planning period, so they have not been able to collaborate by course content. Or even if they teach one course at a high school that may be taught at other high schools but not at their high school, could they collaborate across the district? So we are really hoping that you will consider an early release day, on which all that means is 2 hours early on a Wednesday, to allow our teachers to have planning time to work on this. It's going to be an imposition to our families, and we recognize that, but I think when you do a cost-benefit analysis and you think about, are there ways that we have to figure out some additional childcare, especially at the younger levels, with paraprofessionals that are there to support this early release? But when you do a cost-benefit analysis and you say that is going to be a cost that our families have to consider picking up their child early, and you think about the quality improvement in the instruction that teachers could collaborate and plan, I think, our children would be the winners in that. So that's one of the things we want you to consider too.
So next item. Yeah. So again, the early release day brings up the next item, which is the before and after school childcare, predominantly at our elementary schools. Chris Renoff, the Executive Director of Elementary Schools, who is not here because he's good for him. He had to be elsewhere.
Well deserved.
Yes. But he has surveyed his principals, and they have said they will do it. They have said they will do it. There are still concerns about this because, for example, Brentwood Elementary has 260 children in their aftercare program. Children are not staying in their classrooms, they're going to a cafeteria. And then they're moving outside onto playgrounds. And just as another point of note, because there is no way to clean every time somebody goes down a slide or gets on a swing, our playground equipment will be closed. We won't have playground equipment available to children. So they will be outside, but if it's raining, they'll still have to be inside. Normally, they're inside of a cafeteria. but I don't know that we want to put 260 children in a cafeteria all together. So they may spread into media centers or art rooms or throughout the whole school, which we can do. The issue then becomes, how do I get that school clean for the next day? So this is another decision point that we would need to request from you as to whether or not we would need to continue to do that. If we continue to do that, would we also expand that on our early release days so that parents would then be paying for childcare on that day, because our hope is to have our paraprofessional staff in with our teachers during this planning period, because that's when it's the most collaborative and they can get the most accomplished. So that's the next decision point that we would like to get from you on July 14th is, do we open our own provided childcare programs? 3 of our schools are operated by a third party. Chris isn't here, so I don't know the answer of whether or not they would be able to accommodate an early release at those schools. If not, we would have to figure it out with the paraprofessionals at those schools. But so just so you're aware, that becomes the next decision point that we're looking for some guidance on the 14th.
Mrs. Ziegler?
I just wanted to clarify maybe in advance of this, and thank you for getting this information. And again, I recognize there's 2 sides. There's the capacity of facilities and keeping our employees safe, also giving them rest time. Do we even have enough people to the point you brought forward earlier? And then when I first heard about this, because I'm aware there's a very limited capacity in this county, quite frankly, as it pertains to childcare and accessibility, it gave me incredible heartburn. Not putting it, that's why I wanted it to be addressed here so we can weigh through the options. So I'm very encouraged to hear our principals are open to that and looking to do that. I'm questioning, just when we hear it, not questioning, I'm thinking, are there creative ways where you could block schedule the aftercare? I mean, this is getting a little bit more down into the weeds, but where you could block schedule. Of course, we're in Florida, it rains, so that's difficult. But when you talk about playgrounds or what have you, I mean, are there creative ways and that where we're not having 260 students in there? But I don't know if we have enough staff that oversees that. Second is, and this is kind of an open-ended question that we can get back, is confirming, because I know we talked about this, that our third-party organization, have we confirmed that they're actually going to offer childcare at the 3 schools that they do? So I don't know if that's been, I don't know. And then I certainly know there are ongoing discussions about childcare in the county and first responders and what have you. Thank you to the Barancik Foundation who's kind of leading that, but it's a lot of people involved in that, and whether or not we've engaged in whatever discussions we can to, because I certainly know there's a lot of these organizations reaching out to see how they can help. And this is going to be a big part of it. And you raise very valid questions, and we don't want to put increased risk on our employees because it'll have a ripple effect. So we have to think of the macro effects as well. But I also know how challenging it's going to be on our families who, so I just, again, those are all open-ended. I'm not expecting answers to those. But it would help certainly in the decision-making, I think, for us on the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you very much.
Well, I guess I thought we were not going to do any child care because I think we've had conversations about that. But is this something that will cost the family money, this free child care? Who will do this for us?
So these are operated by our individual schools. It's usually a principal's decision whether or not to have a child care in their facility or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fee that is board approved every year. What is it, $8 a day, I believe, and $4 if you're on free and reduced lunch. And
Yep.
So, but they do, and I will just tell you that the child care fees that they generate must at least cover the cost of the expenses of the program. So every child care worker who works here receives their pay through the district. And it comes from those fees.
And it's in the morning and in the afternoon with an extended day on Wednesday.
And so but that would be what we'd be asking. Some don't have before care, or they stagger the schedules of their paras to cover that short amount of time in the morning, and they just have an aftercare program that they charge for. Some
and
have
that's over at
both.
6 or something like that?
Hmm?
Is it open as late as 6?
5:30, I believe.
No, I was saying it's $4 in the morning, $8 at night.
Yeah.
It's $12 total.
A day.
a day.
per day, right.
Not that I pay attention.
And then the, and normally they're, high school kids or younger kids working at these programs. But, so yeah, that would be helpful to us if you could help us make those decisions.
Mrs. Brown?
We also have to remember that if we have an early release and have the teachers there to do their collaborative planning, some of those teachers have their children go to their school and and they stay in aftercare. So it's like, we have to have something for at least those teachers that are there. But I do agree that, I think some sort of an aftercare works, especially on those early release days. I don't know how we can have those teachers there without having someone watching their kids.
And then the last, I'm sorry,
No.
Could I just add, Chris, I just texted Chris, and he said the YMCA is providing childcare at the 3 sites. They're planning to do that, so that's really for Bridget. But,
What
whatever
about
the
Girls Inc. and
title
Boys and
is.
Girls Club? Will they?
No.
The YMCA here?
It may have changed the name. I'm sorry.
The name is different this year because we've looked at those contracts. I don't recall what it is, but
Yeah,
it's.
I don't either.
It might be the stakeholders for foster care that would be doing that.
Yeah, I don't remember the name, but I know it's not the YMCA, but I think it's the people.
Different from what is the former YMCA.
Sorry. Yes.
Do we know if Girls Inc. and Boys and Girls Club will have their programs open, or when?
Can't hear you. I don't know why it's so hard to hear you.
Oh, well, now it's not on, so that was part of my problem. But yes, Girls Inc. and Boys and Girls Club, they're operating programs currently, so I would imagine that they would be open in the fall. And then we'll have to just make sure we let Bridget know about the why, because that was her question. And I got another one. I feel like, Tara, Safe Children Coalition also.
Safe Children Coalition.
That's the name. Yeah.
That's the name of the former Y
the
program.
former Y that's operating the child care programs. Thank you, Tara. And the last question, which is the big one, is the face coverings, which we've kind of gone through. But again, are we making it mandatory for students and staff, mandatory just for staff, strongly recommended for students and staff, or strongly recommended but mandatory during transitions on the bus or any other time when you're not able to maintain a safe distance? So those are the decisions we're hoping to get from you guys when we come back to meet on the 14th. Of course, in the meantime, we'll still be working fast and feverishly on refining everything that we can refine. Do you guys have any other questions for us?
Do you have any?
Okay.
Yes.
Can I just say thank you to the task force?
Yeah, thank you, guys.
I so appreciate all that they have done and the time that they have put into this. It's been a massive undertaking, and so
Yeah, it was a very short period of time. They met, I think we might have broken Zoom. We had so many Zoom meetings.
Well, I'm sure, I know from me, I would like to thank you all for all of the hard work that you've put in, but this is really coming from the board. The board is aware of how much time you have put into this and your commitment and dedication to the children, and thank you very much. This is a tough decision that we will have to be making, but we know that whatever your recommendation is, you have thoroughly vetted it, and you're coming to us with the best decisions that you think we should do. So I appreciate that. I really do. I think we all appreciate that. Thank you.
And Mrs. Ziegler, you had stepped away. We just wanted to let you know that it's not the Y anymore. It's the Safe Children Coalition, but they've all confirmed the 3 sites will be open.
Thank you so much. Sorry, too much coffee.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything else. If you have anything, just gotta do public comment. Oh, no.
Public comment.
No, public comment. We have to do public comment. I apologize.
People are like, what?
We reversed the order, so I totally get it. Did they fill out cards?
Are there any cards filled out?
Oh, you don't have any cards? Oh, okay.
Does anybody want to speak?
There's just, we have one, I guess. Go ahead. Yes, sure.
And I have, okay, is that good?
Yep, she's good.
Okay, my name is Cindy Tan. I have kids at Ashton Elementary, and I'm sorry, I've seen you guys here. It's a little nerve-wracking, but okay.
Oh, please don't be nervous. We don't bite.
With, the COVID cases on the rise, including some cases even with the Sarasota County school employees that I've heard about, would you seriously consider reopening like both the remote learning and in-person learning after Labor Day? I mean, to give you guys more time to, reevaluate the situation, or I just want to hear your thoughts on that. Is that something that you're seriously looking into, though?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I'll just see if I can get a few more things out. My kids are in elementary school, and I'm just a little bit concerned about the masks because they're not at much risk of contracting the disease. And if they do, their symptoms are, of course, mild or non-existent lots of times. And there's just so many classroom management issues involved with the mask, too. I guess what I'm asking is, how mandatory will these masks be? Do we know? We don't know the answers to that yet.
Hopefully July 14th.
July 14th, okay. And I do definitely think that the staff needs to be protected. They need to wear masks. But as far as the children go, what about kids that come to school with no mask, or they have dirty masks, or, is the school going to provide a mask for them? That's another question. So I guess we'll find all that out.
Yeah, we will have disposable masks available at every school.
Okay, great.
As my physician told me, it's great that you wear a mask because you're protecting everyone else. But if they don't wear a mask, you are not protected.
Right.
That really floored me because I didn't see it that way. So if you choose not to wear a mask and you have it, and I have a mask on, I will catch it. So that's why we really need to be very sure of what we do, because if a student has it and is around someone with a mask, that person could catch it.
Okay.
I think when you see it that way, think about it that way, like I'm protecting you, but you need to protect me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. And I guess I just know that children aren't at as much risk as far as contracting the disease.
But they're carriers.
They could carry it. That's why I think I want to stress that it's good for of course, the teachers and the staff to definitely have a mask. I was happy to hear that you're providing masks for them if they need them. Yeah. So,
Mrs. Brown, do you want to reply?
Well, again, if they're carrying it or they don't get as sick, they can cough, sneeze, or yell and pass it on to somebody else in the classroom. So, but, and if we, wait until Labor Day, we are required to have 180 days of instruction.
Mm-hmm.
So
it would go on into June. I know the hard thing is also teachers wouldn't be getting paid, or you'd have to readjust that schedule, right?
That's correct.
If teachers teach 180 days, they get paid 180 days. So that's what it's. So if we wait and make them come later, they'll have to stay later. Maybe we would have to, because right now we've got a whole week for Thanksgiving. Maybe we'll cut that down. So whatever you do at the front end is going to cause problems at the back end.
Right.
And maybe we've got to shut down for a week during the flu. But I would think that perhaps the flu season won't be as bad, because if we're covering our face to keep us from the COVID virus, maybe we're keeping the flu virus away too with the washing our hands. I mean, a virus is a virus. But, just, follow on the website the changes and when you're getting the emails or the text messages about what's happening. But, you know, just try to be patient with us and try to understand. We're listening to a lot of things. But, you know, we're navigating uncharted waters right now. It's all new. You are anxious, we're anxious, they're anxious. I mean, they're anxious for all of us. You heard Ms. Corcoran earlier. I mean, this is an emotional thing for all of us. I mean, you're carrying this, your kids on your shoulders. She's got a lot of kids hanging on hers.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
And to some extent, we do too. So just try to be patient and try to work with us when we come up with the plan. Try, you know, and weigh the options. Weigh the options of what's the best thing for your student, but also for the other students in the classroom.
Yes, and just to confirm, the petitions have been purchased. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
They're on order.
They're on order. Okay. Thank
They'll
you.
be here for the start of
I
school.
think that's all for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming up to speak.
Okay.
Anyone else want to speak?
Sure. Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Yes.
First, I just want to thank all of you for your hard work, serving, working late hours. I'm with Child Evangelism Fellowship. If there's anything we can do behind the scenes or anything, reach out to other community organizations. I love to hit the phones. Any way we can serve, just let us know. You know, we're available wherever it takes. The only question I had is specifically with, as you guys are planning on, I'm sure it's been brought up, but we just did a training in the summer where we had virtual and in-person distance. And one thing we did was we did a hardwired webcam to be able to control the signal to where the students weren't seen, but we had virtual students being able to be participating in the instruction without compromising anything as far as the students, and the teacher was visible and being able to engage. Because we had the chat room aspect of it with the virtual students, we had someone in the room that was able during question and answer to be able to treat the virtual students like they were in the room, but also be able to sort of balance the in-person and virtual. I wasn't sure if that'd be something that the district would consider. Thank you.
So just to answer that question, we have contemplated that.
Yes.
The issue is that, well, I mean, we could probably do it. The problem is that when you're in a classroom, I mean, maybe the older kids, it might not be a big issue, but we'd have to have a camera installed and a microphone installed. And unless they stand completely still, they, you know, if they walked out of the frame or they went to go help a kid, then the student sees nothing.
Yes.
And so that is kind of, and I know my daughter is an elementary school teacher and has 10,000 steps before lunch.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it would be very difficult to do that model versus just having a remote teacher working directly with all remote students and having in-person teacher working with in-person students.
Thank you. Yeah, the only way it worked for us was in our situation, the system had a very good ability. We did some research on the camera itself as far as being able to pull sound, where we didn't have to have a full-on like microphone for it to truly work. But also the teacher had to be disciplined. They knew, in a sense, like tape on the floor. They had this way to this way, and that was it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you. You want to talk?
No. Oh, we do. We do.
Okay.
I'm sorry. One more quick statement, just technical.
Yes, I did. It's no. During our broadcast today, the server crashed, and so some of this was not broadcast live. However, the entire program will be viewed on YouTube later. We did lose some time, but we have it all captured. So after tonight, it'll be uploaded, and the entire broadcast can be seen live. So anybody that saw it went down, you can go zoom, fast forward to that area, and you can watch that area that you might have missed. It was only down, I'd say, for a minute or two, but it might have happened 2 or 3 times as it tried to reboot. In full transparency, I want to make sure everybody knows that they can go back and watch the full broadcast at any moment to figure that out. Also, I'd like to say that this is the highest watched school board meeting that we've ever had. We have the
Big
numbers.
surprise.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, so we're adjourned.
Thank you, Chuck, and all the task force for joining. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're adjourned for a second time.
Thanks, Arthur. Good weekend.
Thank you.